Hi, I'm Michael Power, a manager of educational programs for Tacoma Housing Authority. And I'm here to talk to you about an exciting program that we're doing in partnership with Tacoma Public Schools and a number of community partners here in Tacoma to try to address some of the critical issues that are impacting low-income families here in Tacoma and, of course, nationwide. There's a lot of data out about how students are doing nationally on their achievement in school, and it's pretty grim. In many cases, students who are minority students or low-income students have traditionally been underperforming and continue to underperform despite many of the initiatives and national reforms and local reforms that have taken place. This chart shows the gap between our lowest earning families, children from our lowest earning families, and children from our highest earning families. There's a difference of 24 percentiles. That's about a quarter of the possible range of achievement that children could be experiencing between students who are very low in their income and students who are very high. And there's a tremendous number of factors that relate to that: the educational experiences of the parents, the history of the family, the places that they live. We know that zip code is unfortunately a predictor of performance. If you live in a poor neighborhood and with very few resources, you're likely to do less well in school. A lot of people, as I say, have done a lot of things to try to impact this, but we still see this gap year after year after year. The high school graduation for homeless children is less than 25%. The high school graduation rate for the population is about 70% nationwide. It's about 74, 75% here in Washington State, but it's less than 25% for homeless students trying to get out of high school. The difference, therefore, in lifetime earnings they can expect: if you have a high school degree, you can expect to earn $200,000 more in your lifetime than not having a high school degree. The impact just here in Washington State in lifetime earnings is $700 million. And the loss in contributions to society here in Washington State have been estimated at $416 million. So let's think about who these children are that are homeless in Washington State. 10,000 children under age 6 are homeless in Washington State. Elementary school through middle school, 9,000, and then it drops down in high school, but remember, that's because they're not in high school. These kids are much more likely to drop out. And a total for school-age children who should be in school, 24,000 students in Washington State that are homeless. Washington runs about middle of the road in terms of the risk of homelessness and the vulnerability of these children. Obviously, we'd want to be number one in reducing the risk of homelessness, but we're right about the middle of the pack on that. The number of factors that come into play in the lives of these children and these families who are homeless, it's daunting to think of all of the things that they struggle with. A few of them are listed here. They're much more likely to be victims of crime. They're much more likely to be living in substandard transitional housing, even if they're homeless. Drug issues, obviously, violence, domestic violence issues really hit these families the hardest. Even though there are widespread problems throughout society, they are really intense in dealing with families of homelessness. So, where do you start? We've got all kinds of these issues going on. They've been going on for years. The achievement gap. Racism plays into this. Classism, the bias in society against people who are low income, the assumption, why don't they just get back to work? Why don't they just go get a house? Well, no one agency can take that on. Partnerships can start to make a difference. So we're a housing agency, and we deal with housing instability. We can have an impact on that. So we started to have conversations with Tacoma Public Schools and said, how can we and the resources we bring to the conversation make a difference for kids and their achievement and their outcomes in schools and ultimately their outcomes in society? So where do we start? We decided to start here. We decided to start with McCarver Elementary School, which is a school on the Hilltop neighborhood of Tacoma. The Hilltop neighborhood is a very low income, traditionally a high crime neighborhood. undergoing revitalization, certain amount of gentrification, but still a tremendous amount of needs in the neighborhood. McCarver Elementary sits right in the middle of Hilltop. It's one of the areas that we feel very closely to because many of our families that we provide housing for in Tacoma Housing Authority live in the Hilltop neighborhood. McCarver has a very interesting history. It was originally built in 1925. It was one of the first magnet schools in the United States. A magnet school is a school that children can go to because of the programs they have there, not just because they live in the neighborhood. So kids came from all over Tacoma to go to McCarver because of the special programs they had there. Back in the 1960s and 70s, Tacoma, the district, and the city were recognized nationally as one of the leaders in voluntary desegregation. And McCarver was right in the heart of that, being in a very diverse community. If you go back and look at the pictures of the kids back in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, it was mostly Caucasian families, but the diversity increased tremendously. And part of it was a voluntary action on the part of the school district to increase the diversity and the desegregation that had happened in the community. Now McCarver Elementary School has a very different profile. 92% of the students at the school are very low income as measured by the category of receiving free and reduced lunch at school. 73% of the students are minority, and it's a great diversity of minority. It's not just African American children. We have Asian children, Hispanic children, children who come from other countries, and many students who are learning English as a second language. The mobility rate, and we're going to spend some time on this, the mobility rate within the school, students turning over within a school year, sometimes within a month, is extremely high at McCarver, and it's the highest in Tacoma Public Schools. And it's one of the reasons Tacoma Housing Authority is interested in working with McCarver because, again, housing stability is the reason they're having this problem. This is not a school where people go off to another part of the country and work and come back. People are moving within within Tacoma School District and within Pierce County to find reasonable, affordable housing. Very high homelessness rate at the school as well. That has real implications for a housing authority. So, Tacoma Housing Authority, we provide housing. We're not an educational agency, but we have a very deep interest in education. Our mission statement says we work with families in terms of their housing, in terms of their development as citizens, as tenants, also as students. And we take that part of our mission statement very seriously. At this point, I'd like you to hear from some students who are participants in our special housing program, and they will tell you from their point of view what it means to transition from homelessness to stable housing.
My mom does not have to worry.
If you're absent from school, you don't know what you learned that day. I don't have to worry about not being late.
It's awesome living in a new house. And at my old house, it wasn't that much fun. The stairs were crooked and they would make a lot of noise sometimes. Fridge, it would leak out water. So washer and dryer, parts of it will break off, and put stuff on the stuff to smell to let the house smell good. Like fire comes out.
Kind of hard because you're worried about moving and you have homework, and when you're more worried about moving, you can't get as much of your homework done. Really affect your grades because if you're absent from school, you don't know what you learned that day. And if like there's a test coming up and you didn't learn that, it would really hurt your grade.
My mom does not have to worry, so she has a job now, and the stairs are fine, the fridge is fine, and everybody is doing fine. Nobody is worrying or the stove's catching on fire. None of that's happening.
You got a living room, dining room, kitchen, washer and dryer, me and my brother's bedroom, my mom and sister's bedroom. 2 closets, bathroom, playing in the front yard, because there's like a little yard, and watching TV and playing video games.
Like, it's gonna be better to do my homework, because in the last house the power would just turn off.
It's gonna be great because I don't have to worry about not being late, not being absent, getting more of my homework done.
It's awesome living in a new house.
I'd like to give you a quick overview of what the key components of this program are. We are supporting currently, starting in the fall of 2011, 50 families. These are families who this summer, this past spring, were homeless or at severe risk of homelessness, which means they were perhaps about to lose their housing, for sure about to lose their housing. So these are families in the most severe need for the kind of support that we're talking about. We provide them with rental support. We don't put them in our public housing, but we give them the rental support where they can go and find an apartment or a home that's the appropriate size for their family, and they can live there in stable housing for up to 5 years. Now, what happens with this program, because we want to encourage families and support families to be independent of us eventually, unlike many public housing programs, this does not last as long as you continue to be low income. This is a 5-year limit. So during those 5 years, every year the rent increases. So this first year, families are paying only 25% of rent each month. But in the second year, they'll start paying 20% of their rent, and then 40, 60, 80. At the end of the 5th year, they will be rent independent with our help. The way that we'll get help is we have 2 full-time case managers who are working directly with the families and only on the McCarver program to make sure they're getting the resources they need. We'll talk more about that later. And a lot of that is because we have this extensive network of partners in Tacoma who are helping us. We are not service providers ourselves. We don't do job training, ESL classes, those sort of things, but we have partners who do. One of the more exciting things about this program, and particularly exciting to me as a career educator, is the school is taking advantage of this increased stability at McCarver to do some exciting things in terms of their curriculum approach. So right now they're working on instituting the primary year's International Baccalaureate program. Most folks know International Baccalaureate, if they know of it at all, as a high school program, and it's a very strong, powerful high school program. But there's also an elementary program called the primary years, which enables students to learn the regular elementary curriculum, but they learn it in a much more integrated way with themes that connect to international issues and get kids involved in very meaningful discussions that they can apply their math learning, their literacy learning, their science learning across the whole curriculum. The school district is looking at how they can provide an International Baccalaureate program with McCarver as the primary end and through our high school program, so kids could theoretically be in an international program from kindergarten up through high school graduation, which would be tremendously exciting, particularly given this is the population of students who normally do not have access to that level of curriculum support. In order to participate in our program, parents have to make 5 commitments to assure that their children are successful and ensure that they are successful both as renters and tenants and as parents. The first one is to assure that we have the impact on the school that we'd hope to have. They need to keep their children in McCarver. Some families would like to have the housing support and move their child to another program in another school, but as much as we sympathize with their need to do that, the idea is to help McCarver Elementary School. So they do need to keep their children in McCarver. And I should point out that in order to be eligible for the program, they needed to have a child in kindergarten, 1st or 2nd grade at McCarver this fall of 2011. That's to assure that they're in the program and in the school long enough to make a difference. The second one is they need to be actively involved in their child's education. That means joining the PTA, being an active member of the PTA, being on school committees, going to school activities, and we will stage activities ourselves at the school. But more critically, they need to be involved at home and throughout the year with their children in terms of what the children are learning, asking them what they're learning, helping to support them in their learning, reading with them, writing with them, taking them to opportunities for the children to learn. All of these things that we know from research make a huge difference and really accentuate the gap between middle class and upper class families who do all this kind of thing as a natural course of the way they live their lives, and lower income families who tend to be more struggling with the basics and have not been trained or experienced in how to interact with their children around their education. So we are providing that support through parent training. The third commitment they have to make is obviously working on their own economic development, because they have to start paying 20% of their rent next year, and then by 5 years they need to be rent independent. This is very different than a typical program that's run through the Tacoma Housing Authority, where once people qualify, as long as they continue to be low income, they can keep their housing support. In this program, it is a maximum of 5 years, so they do need to be rent independent by the end of 5 years. And we're working with community partners on job skills, on job placement, doing interviews, all the soft skills of finding and keeping jobs. We'll work with them on those throughout the program. The fourth one is they need to work very closely with us. I mentioned we have 2 caseworkers who are meeting with the families on a regular basis, know them by name, know all their needs. Folks need to come to their meetings, they need to answer the phone calls, they need to answer the letters, however we're communicating with them. We need to see them on a very regular basis, get to know them so that we can know how to provide the support. Nothing is more critical in assessing the success of a program like this, particularly something that is quite innovative. There isn't anybody who's really done anything quite like this that we've discovered. We need data. We need data on how the children are succeeding in school. We need data on how the parents are participating in all these activities we set up for them. And we need data on how the parent outcomes are doing. Typically, if anyone is listening to this video has worked with large bureaucratic organizations, you know that sharing data across organizations and systems is very challenging. Not just the mechanics of it, but the legalities of it. To get data from a school system and give it to a public housing authority is a very complicated and difficult thing, but we have a great partnership with Tacoma Public Schools to get the data, the partnership to help analyze the data and report it. It's all based on the parents giving us access to the data. So all of our parents have signed a release that says, yes, you can share data about my child and about my own success with other agencies that are partnerships in this program. Therefore, we'll be able to do the evaluation which we need for our funders, but more critically, we need to adapt the program as we go along where we see the strengths and the challenges are. And then at the end of the program to say to other people, my gosh, this really did work. We thought it would, we hoped it would, but it really did. And to help other people replicate it and help us replicate it in other situations. So here's a brief list of the kinds of partnerships we have. I haven't listed individual names other than Tacoma Public Schools because we're constantly getting more partners and I wouldn't want to leave anybody out. But we're working with post-secondary institutions to make sure people are getting their adult basic education, their GEDs, college degrees, job skills agencies to get the training they need. Many agencies that also work throughout Tacoma to help coordinate services. Rather than going one by one, we're working with these coordinating agencies to make sure we know what the services are and that our families are connected to them. Public health, obviously, other housing agencies, because we don't necessarily have all the housing we need to provide the families. Housing is at very short supply throughout the nation and particularly here in Tacoma. Many of the social service agencies that will provide families with the support they need. If you remember the slide a while back, with all the different challenges that these families face, a lot of different partners need to come into play to make sure that we can support them. And obviously, funding is critical to this. The housing agency is coming through to support the housing itself, but we need partners in order to provide the funding for our caseworkers, for the different materials and supplies, and all the contracts that we have to execute in order to make sure these services are provided. So a big chunk of it comes from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who are very interested in both education and housing in homelessness, and they see this as a very innovative way to tie all of those together. And Pierce County has come through with a lot of very strong support, because obviously homelessness, as you've seen in earlier slides, is a critical issue for us. Education is, and anybody who's working to tie all these together is going to get a lot of support from the county as well as the foundations. If you have further questions about this program, you can contact me. We have an education page on our agency website, which has lots of our reports and documents loaded up there. We'll be adding things such as this video to that as we create them. And I'm also available if you want to contact me by email. So it's an exciting program. We have a lot of people who are very enthusiastic and very excited and very anxious to find out how well this is going to work. And not the least of them are our 50 families and their children. And we're doing everything we can to make sure that it does work. And when it does, we'll do everything we can to make sure people know about it.